the sense of being a seeker, whether it's the seeking mind that wants to understand, that wants to achieve a certain state, that wants to free itself from the torment of internal chatter or busy mind, thought activity, or whether it's the seeking from the heart, a deeper longing to come home, whether it's the one who needs or wants to practice meditation or inquiry, or that seeker is what creates or drives the search for discovering who we are. So in that sense, it's not something to get rid of. Very often when there's a conversation about the end of the seeker, the interpretive mind will say, well, that's it then. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to, inquire within. I don't need to listen to any teacher or that sort of thing. And that's not what it's about. It's not about just giving up and reverting to the default position of egoic consciousness. The end of the seeker is a conversation that comes at some point on the path, usually a certain level of maturity on the path, where we start to question, if you like, who is seeking? We start to look at whether the seeker actually exists as a solid entity, or is the seeker an aspect of the me self, the me that believes itself to be at the center of life, the me that wants to awaken, the me that believes awakening happens to the self. If awakening happens to the self, that comes with a whole load of assumptions that need to be examined at some point. Some of those assumptions are that awakening happens in the future. It's a future state, it's never here. It's something to work towards, it's something to progress towards. It's something that happens when I'm good enough, when I'm perfect enough, when I'm spiritual enough. It's something that happens at the end of the search as an achievement after some effort, spiritual effort. That's one assumption. The other big assumption is that it happens to the self. In other words, when awakening happens, it will change me. I'll become a better self. It'll change it'll transform my personality or my tendencies or my, the movements within me, my preferences and so on. All of this is centered around the me that believes itself to be the center of life. It also, another assumption is that the seeker, the me self, is missing something, is not complete, and that awakening will bring something to complete me. But if we look more closely and ask, who is the one that is seeking? What is this entity that I believe myself to be? We can start to see that it's a conglomerate of thoughts, imaginations, hopes, fears, memories, desires, and so on. And if we look even more closely, we see that all of that is not static, it's not solid, it's constantly fluctuating. When I say look closely, I mean into the immediacy of our experience, not into the future projection of mind. But right here, right now, everything is fluctuating, nothing is static. Every thought comes and goes, every desire comes and goes, every memory comes and goes, just like clouds drifting across the sky. So where does this seeker exist? This very intimate observing is what dissolves the seeker in this moment, in this moment. It's a kind of relaxation of the identity that's invested in the seeker. In that relaxation, identity comes undone. There's nobody here. There's simply a quiet simplicity, a quiet awareness, a sense of being rather than becoming. You see, awakening doesn't happen to the person. The identification with the person loosens, softens, and that which is already awake reveals itself. It's like a cosmic joke. We spend a lifetime or lifetimes being the one, the person that wants to awaken. And then, if awakening reveals itself, we see that that which we were seeking was already here, but it had nothing to do with the person. It's that which is here prior to the person. And yet all that seeking hasn't been a waste of time. It's been a necessary part of that revelation. So there's often a question then, if awakening doesn't happen to the person, what happens to the person? What's the point? If nothing changes, what's the value of the search? Well, first of all, if it's not happening to the person, the personality, which is mind, body, configuration, doesn't just vanish. When we say there's nobody here, it doesn't mean the body disappears or the mind disappears or the personality disappears. Simply the center has come undone. the tight grip of identity has come undone. So the body and the mind continue to function. The unique pattern of your individuation continues. You have certain preferences, you have certain tendencies based on your culture, your education, your gender, your genetics, the particular imprint that's made at the time of your birth, your experiences, life experiences. So these are not erased. The human pattern is not erased. It's simply that these patterns are no longer experienced as who you are. And there's great freedom in that. The pattern of this human life, this human individuation, takes place within the open field of awareness. Just as a thought takes place in awareness, just as a sensation takes place in awareness, these are all patterns, movements. So there's no longer a fixed identity. When there's no longer a fixed identity, you don't have to control anything, you don't have to manage anything, you don't have to control yourself. You don't have to manage yourself. You don't have to fix yourself. So you, as a human being, become lighter. We could say the personality becomes lighter. So even though certain preferences arise, even some patterning arises, they're no longer reinforced by the sense of, this is who I am. The reason that people become more rigid as they get older is that the patterning, the karmic tendencies, the personal tendencies, the conditioning, the genetic tendencies and so on, get reinforced over time, over and over again, because each time they arise, there's a conscious or unconscious identification with that pattern. And then the attempt to suppress it, or the attempt to get rid of it, or the attempt to hold on to it. And so we rigidify into these, if you like, tight personalities. But in awakening, even though certain patterns may arise as part of your unique patterning, they're no longer reinforced, which means that some of them, especially if they are let's say not of value, not of benefit to the wholeness, the completeness of the self, come undone. For instance, patterns of victimhood, patterns of poor me, or patterns of control, and so on. They just simply fall away. So the personality becomes more fluid, less rigid, less defended. So it's not as if all human patterning or all conditioning completely gets erased by awakening. That's a great error of the seeking mind, of the seeking self. We're not totally reprogrammed or rewired. There's this idea often that awakening rewires the nervous system. This is not the case. the nervous system may calm down, the nervous system quiets down because there's no longer a reactive response, but a responsive response to life. In the space of awareness, reactive patterns tend to come undone. But that's not the same as rewiring the nervous system. Some people speak of and have asked, it's a very common question, about the experiences of a lot of energy moving through the system. I'm often asked about that. That awakening has this feeling of a lot of energy moving through the system, a lot of release. Some call it kundalini, and this, that, and the other. It's important, I think, to differentiate between awakening and energy moving or energy release. Awakening is fundamentally a shift in identity. The recognition that awareness is what you are, prior to identity. It's the seeing through of mistaken identity. And that's not something that happens to the body, and it's not something that happens to the brain. Therefore, there's no rewiring needed. It is very simple, and it's already here. It's direct. What can happen after awakening is that because old tensions may be released, because old emotional patterns may surface and come into the light of awareness, because perception is no longer locked into the myopia of ego view, but becomes more open, then the energy system, mind, body, including nervous system that holds it all together, simply reorganizes itself and releases tension. That's kundalini. Could be shaking, could be heat, it could be whatever. But that in itself is not awakening. Yeah? And some people become attached to those experiences. A heightened sensitivity or waves of energy. And then they seek more of that. And there's a danger in that. There's a danger in confusing powerful energy movements with something that we might call enlightenment. But all energy comes and goes. All phenomena comes and goes. Awakening itself is not an energy experience. It's simple. It's like the leaf that falls off the tree. If in that falling open there is a movement of energy, then we are called to simply let that energy move within that open field, within that openness. And in this way, the whole organism just naturally realigns itself, not with fireworks, although a firework here or there may arise. And just going back to the personhood, the personality. To reiterate that it just simply becomes lighter. We're less attached to doing it my way. because I've always done it like this, being this sort of person. I'm an extrovert, or I'm an introvert. We're responsive, if you like, from the outside in. It can seem there are times where we are more extrovert. And then there are times where we are introvert, if we want to label it in that way. And there's no fixation on a particular way. And this just goes into all areas of life. That's why the awake one who is awake, can seem contradictory. They can seem very ordinary and even enjoy the pleasures of life, the aesthetics of life, the playfulness of life. Or they can be completely uninterested. And so there's a certain paradoxical or seemingly from the outside contradictory, confusing way when somebody is supposedly awake and they're always a certain way. I would be a little suspicious. Or a little cautious. We play, there's a playfulness with the Leela.